There were 4 boys. I just don't know the name of the other boy. So.
Have you been contacted by anybody saying, hey, I was at that party too?
No, I haven't talked with anyone from that party.
Okay. Now, you've been detailed about what happened once you got up the stairs, and so I don't need to go through that again. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just realized that I said something that was inaccurate. I said I hadn't spoken with anyone from the party since that. I've spoken with Leland.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. I appreciate that. You've gone into detail about what happened once you went up the stairs, so I don't feel like it's necessary to go over those things again.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you told us everything that you do remember about it?
I believe so, but if there are other questions, I can attempt to answer them.
Okay. You said that the music was solely coming from that room. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it was turned up once the 3 of you were inside that room. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, do you recall it being turned down?
I don't remember if it was turned down once I was leaving the house. I don't remember.
Okay.
Likely, since I could hear them walking down the stairs very clearly from the bathroom.
Okay. And the bathroom door was closed when you heard this. Is that correct?
I could hear them very clearly hitting the walls, going down the stairwell.
In fact, in your letter, you said that they went down the stairs and they were talking with other people in the house.
Correct.
Were you able to hear that conversation?
I was not able to hear that conversation, but I was aware that they were downstairs and that I would have to walk past them to get out of the house.
Okay. Now, let me make sure we're on the same page. Were you not able to hear the conversation or not able to understand the conversation?
I couldn't hear the conversation. I was upstairs.
Okay. How do you know there was a conversation?
I'm just assuming since it was a social gathering, people were talking. I don't know.
Okay. In your letter,
I could hear them talking as they went down the stairwell. They were laughing and...
Okay. In your letter, you wrote, both loudly stumbled down the stairwell, at which point other persons at the house were talking with them. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, I had to walk past everyone to leave the house, so.
Okay.
Your letter. I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
Okay. Your next sentence, let me try to clarify this. After you said other persons at the house were talking with them, the letter goes on with the very next sentence. I exited the bathroom, ran outside of the house, and went home.
Correct.
Okay. You said that you do not remember how you got home. Is that correct?
I do not remember.
Okay.
Other than I did not drive home.
Okay. I'm going to show you, if somebody could provide to you a map of the various people's houses at the time, and if you could verify that this is where you were living at the time.
Where I was living at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of these documents?
We do not have a copy, but
if you want one, we can get you one.
Yes, before the questions begin, so we can follow the testimony.
Okay. My staff said that we should not provide the copy.
No, we will provide the copy. We will provide the copy.
Yeah, well, speak plainly with me, please.
Oh, sure. I'd
No,
like to see what she's looking at.
Yeah, you have another 30 seconds now because I was rudely interrupted.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Senator Harris, we do have a blown-up copy of this for the members to view, if that's helpful.
Okay, I'm going to put check marks next to homes that I can confirm are the correct locations, and then an X or a question mark when I don't know where these people live.
I'm only asking you to confirm if that map accurately shows where you were living at the time.
Where I lived at the time. So I can't see the street name, but I'm happy to refer to the address or the neighborhood.
Okay, could you tell us that?
Yes, it's River Falls.
Okay.
It's near the, what is the place called? The Naval Research Center on Clara Barton Parkway.
Okay, was that a house or an apartment?
It was my parents' home.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to enter into the record letters of support for Dr. Ford from her classmates at Holton Arms School, 1,200 alumni of the school, 195 of your colleagues, students, and mentors, 1,400 women and men who attended D.C. schools, and 50 members of the Yale Law School faculty who are calling for a full FBI investigation. I ask consent to enter these into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Dr. Ford, as difficult as this experience must be, I want you to know that your courage in coming forward has given countless Americans the strength to face their own life-shattering past and to begin to heal their wounds. By example, you have brought many families into an honest and sometimes painful dialogue that should have occurred a long time ago. I'm sorry for what this has done to you and your family. No one should face harassment, death threats, and disparaging comments by cheap-shot politicians simply for telling the truth. But you and your family should know that for every scurrilous charge and every pathetic tweet, there have been thousands of Americans, women and men, who believe you, support you, and thank you for your courage. Watching your experience, it's no wonder that many sexual assault survivors hide their past and spend their lives suffering in pain silence. You had absolutely nothing to gain by bringing these facts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The fact that you are testifying here today, terrified though you may be, the fact that you have called for an FBI investigation of this incident, the fact that you are prepared to name both Judge Kavanaugh and eyewitness Mark Judge stands in sharp contrast to the obstruction we've seen on the other side. The FBI should have investigated your charges as they did in the Anita Hill hearing, but they did not. Mark Judge should be subpoenaed from his Bethany Beach hideaway and required to testify under oath, but he has not. Judge Kavanaugh, if he truly believes there's no evidence, no witnesses that can prove your case, should be joining us in demanding a thorough FBI investigation, but he has not. Today, you come before this committee and before this nation alone. I know you're joined by counsel and family. The prosecutor on the Republican side will continue to ask questions to test your memory and veracity. After spending decades trying to forget that awful night, it's no wonder your recollection is less than perfect. A polished liar can create a seamless story, but a trauma survivor cannot be expected to remember every painful detail. That's what Senator Leahy has mentioned earlier. One question is critical. In Judge Kavanaugh's opening testimony, which we will hear after you leave, this is what he says. I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I am not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed 2 people who claimed they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%. In the letter which you sent to Senator Feinstein, you wrote, I have not knowingly seen Kavanaugh since the assault. I did see Mark Judge once at the Potomac Village Safeway where he was extremely uncomfortable in seeing me. Would you please describe that encounter at the Safeway with Mark Judge and what led you to believe he was uncomfortable?
Yes. I was going to the Potomac Village Safeway. This is the one on the corner of Falls and River Road. And I was with my mother, and I was a teenager, so I wanted her to go in one door and me go in the other. So I chose the wrong door because the door I chose was the one where Mark Judge was, looked like he was working there and arranging the shopping carts. And I said hello to him. And his face was white and very uncomfortable saying hello back. And we had previously been friendly at the times that we saw each other over the previous 2 years, albeit not very many times. We had always been friendly with one another. I wouldn't characterize him as not friendly. He was just nervous and not really wanting to speak with me.
How
And
long-
he looked a little bit ill.
How long did this occur after the incident?
I would estimate 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we take a break, I can't let what Senator Durbin said. By the way, he's my friend. We work on a lot of legislation together. But you talked about the obstruction from the other side. I cannot let it go by what you've heard me say so many times, that between July 30th and September 13th, there were 45 days this committee could have been investigating this situation, and her privacy would have been protected. So something happened here in between on your side that the whole country, well, not the whole country should have known about it. No, not know about it. We should have investigated it. We'll take a break now for 15 minutes.
Dr. Christine Blasey Ford there, speaking with her lawyer, Michael Bromwich, after about 1 hour of testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Said at the top it would be consequential, said at the top it would be dramatic, also incredibly emotional, unlike any Senate testimony in my memory. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford with about a half-hour opening statement there saying she was terrified to come before the country, but she felt it was her duty, and saying she, as we just saw in that questioning from Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat, number 2 Democrat in the Senate, saying she is 100% sure that it was Brett Kavanaugh that physically assaulted her back when she was in high school 37 years ago. Cokie Roberts here at the desk. We know people are watching this all across the country as this began. I got a text from a friend saying she looks like every woman you know.
She indeed does. She is just someone who is completely recognizable to everybody in the country. We know women just like her, and she certainly doesn't seem to be somebody with an agenda as she is putting herself in this very difficult position. It's a very odd hearing, and the difference between the Democrats and Republicans has been very striking. But her persona, I think, has come off as, so far, as highly credible.
Cecilia, the president said he would be watching.
And they are. He will be on Air Force One. I think he is right now. We know that the White House, the televisions are already glued to this. Everything is on the line for this administration right now. They need this Supreme Court confirmation. We heard the president yesterday out there trying to make his case. He said he's keeping an open mind, that he could hear things that are believable from her today. I don't know how you argue against what you've heard so far.
Sunny Hostin, you've prosecuted these sex crimes. I mean, one of the interesting things about Dr. Ford's testimony is the detail she does remember, and how she explains why she remembers what she remembers. You say that's quite common.
It's quite common because she is a psychologist. She's a clinical psychologist. I've worked with them throughout my career, and the way she is describing the trauma is very credible and very accurate given the job that she has, the career that she has had. I will tell you, in Maryland, there is no statute of limitations for attempted rape, and I think I said this to all of you during the examination here. I would take this case to trial. I mean, you know, I've examined hundreds of witnesses on the witness stand. She is extremely credible. She is extremely detail-oriented. There are little things about what she has said, like the fact that she has 2 front doors. You can't make that stuff up. It is so unusual, that sort of detail. It makes her testimony extremely credible. And the fact that also that she said, I am terrified to be here. I don't want to be here, but I feel that this is my civic duty. I found her to be one of the most credible witnesses I think I've seen.
So far. Dan Abrams, you said coming in this is all about her.
Yeah, and I think so far this has been an unmitigated disaster for Kavanaugh, both procedurally and substantively. First, on the procedural side, you have Rachel Mitchell, this attorney, clearly trying to point out inconsistencies in her account.
Or lay the groundwork for pointing out inconsistencies later.
Correct, but that's the problem, is that in this kind of proceeding, laying groundwork doesn't work. You have her laying groundwork followed by punches from Democrats where they help support the witness's credibility. And then more of these sort of detailed questions, which in a typical trial, you would say, okay, we're going to get a chance. We're going to get a closing argument here. But each one of the Democrats is getting to make a closing argument at each stop. And so it's a real problem for the Republicans. Now, I wonder whether they're going to, at this break, start rethinking how they have to move forward here. Are they going to change strategy and say, you know what, some of us have to be able to get in and speak? Yeah. And then you've got the substantive side of it, which is so far, again, her demeanor, as a witness, she comes across credibly. And if that's going to fail, you're going to need someone to undermine her credibility and to point out inconsistencies.
Let's go to our team on Capitol Hill. David Muir and Mary Bruce are there. That's what it looks like on TV from up here in New York. David, how about the room?
You know, George, I have to say it is unmistakable here how clunky it is, the transition between the Republicans on this committee to the Democrats. You've talked about Rachel Mitchell there, who's been brought in by the Republicans so that they would not have to question Dr. Christine Blasey Ford or Brett Kavanaugh when he appears before us here later today. But that transition back and forth has been bumpy, if you will. But what has not been bumpy is sort of the temperature and tone in that room from the woman who is answering the questions, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Obviously up to the American people at home to make up their own minds about the veracity of what she's saying. But she has been very consistent, George. She said, I am here not because I want to be, I am terrified. She said the details of that night I will never forget, as she choked up reading her opening statement. And then in the questioning that followed, she said, could this be a case of mistaken identity? No was her answer. Is it possible you mix them up? No was her answer. She was just asked by Senator Durbin about the possibility of this being mistaken identity. She said, to this question, what degree of certainty was this Brett Kavanaugh? Her answer, 100%. And I have to say, George, as Americans, and this has become so political, obviously, these allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, as they decide whether or not they believe what they hear today, there is the other major issue in this country in this era of Me Too. In that moment with Senator Patrick Leahy looked at her and said there are millions of people across this country who are victims of sexual abuse, sexual assault, for whom you have become a hero up here today. They respect you for coming forward with nothing to gain. And George, you could see her as she picked up that cup of coffee that she had asked for. She was visibly moved. That was the first moment in the room when her efforts were applauded for representing people around this country whose voices haven't been heard.
Yeah, that is one of the big cases the Democrats are trying to make. Mary Bruce, also up on Capitol Hill. You cover it every single day. We know who the most important audience is here. Just a few senators haven't already made up their minds, but you could also see in that room people visibly tearing up during the testimony.
Yeah. Incredibly emotional in this room, and we are just getting the first reaction from lawmakers here. I'm standing just down the hall from the hearing, and we just saw all of the members of the committee file by, go into a room here right next to me, and Republican Chairman Grassley, when asked if he finds Dr. Ford's testimony to be credible, said, I know we have to take her very seriously. He later told one of our producers, John Parkinson, that he feels that her testimony is something they need to sleep on. Remember, this committee right now is scheduled to have a vote on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination tomorrow morning. And George, remember, Republicans here are really trying to walk a fine line. We have heard members of the committee reiterating over and over again that they need to hear Dr. Ford's testimony, that it's important to hear her side of the story. Yet we've also seen Republican leaders here in the Senate and, of course, the president himself coming out in recent days, rallying behind Judge Kavanaugh. Republicans in many ways trying to walk a fine line and have this both ways. And so much of this today comes down to perception, to how lawmakers will define whether they do find Christine Blasey Ford's testimony to be credible. In fact, I asked one of the Republican members of this committee that exact question yesterday, Republican John Kennedy, and he told me that's like asking him to define the Holy Spirit, that it simply will come down to just a feeling. George.
It will be a feeling. Reminds me of the old Potter Stewart things. Obscenity is something you know when you see it. I want to bring in John Karl as well, picking up the point that Dan Abrams was making about the performance so far, or at least the job the prosecutor was given to do today. Our colleague at the White House, John Santucci, reporting that a source close to President Trump says that the prosecutor not being as effective as they hoped.
Well, I mean, how could she be? She's in doing these 5-minute increments. Every time she starts to get going, she gets interrupted for the Democrats to go. It does not seem to be an effective strategy. But, George, there's a big question, it seems to me, that's raised here in the first part of this hearing, which is, what about Mark Judge? We know we're going to hear from Brett Kavanaugh after this testimony is over. But Mark Judge, as the other person in that room, clearly is relevant to this. The committee has decided not to subpoena him, not to have him testify here.
It does seem like the Democrats have picked up and working that hard, saying that basically laying the ground for how could you possibly have a vote without talking to Mark Judge?
How can you go ahead? How can you go ahead? I mean, after watching this testimony, how can you move ahead with a vote so quickly? But Mark Judge is relevant not only because he was, according to Christine Blasey Ford, in the room and a participant in all of this, but also her very specific memory of approaching him at that Safeway. These are all questions that it seems to me would need to be followed up on before this committee can charge ahead with a vote.
Terry Moran, you've covered so many of these Senate hearings confirming Supreme Court justices. Of course, the closest thing we've ever seen is Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill back in 1991, but this is a very different kind of hearing facing a very different country.
A very different country, George. That's it exactly. And Republicans are in a terrible, terrible bind because of where they are. Look, Brett Kavanaugh is their guy. They feel that he has been unfairly maligned. They are raising what they think is the dirty process that Democrats use to get this allegation out. As people have noted, Christine Blasey Ford did not want to become a public figure. Somebody, probably on the Democratic side, leaked it so that their political interests could overweigh her personal interests. But in order to make their case that Kavanaugh is innocent, not only do they need him to make a very persuasive case, they have to somehow undermine this witness, Christine Blasey Ford. I mean, that's just an incredible... And I'm also thinking of 8 other people watching this right now. The justices of the Supreme Court. Washington is hushed right now. You go around, people are looking at their phones, the hallways are empty. In the chambers of the Supreme Court, I guarantee you they're watching this. They know Brett Kavanaugh. He is a member of the judicial community here in Washington. And at the end of the day, they're all institutionalists. I'm reminded during the Anita Hill-Clarence Thomas dispute, people said, who should get the benefit of the doubt, the accuser or the accused? And Senator Robert Byrd, Democrat of West Virginia, who was going to vote for Clarence Thomas, stood up on the Senate floor and he said, let's give the benefit of the doubt to the court. And he voted against him.
Voted no. Senator Feinstein said at the outset, this is not a trial. This is a job interview for elevation to the highest court in the land. So much is going to turn, as we've said, on the credibility of Dr. Ford and the details as she lays out her testimony. I want to go back to one moment where she talks about why she remembers what is the most indelible memory of that moment where she says she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, then let's go back to the incident. What is the strongest memory you have? Strongest memory of the incident, something that you cannot forget. Take whatever time you need.
Indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the uproarious laughter between the two, and they're having fun at my expense.
You've never forgotten that laughter. You've never forgotten them laughing at you.
They were laughing with each other.
And you were the object of the laughter?
I was, underneath one of them while the two laughed. Two friends having a really good time with one another.
Mary Bruce?
Sending out notes as it happens and there's no cutaway camera.
George, just a remarkable moment, and it gets to such a difference between reading her statement and actually hearing her saying it herself, with these words coming out of Ford's own mouth. And it's part of the reason I think that the emotion in the room is running so incredibly high. One of the other really unusual things about this hearing today is, of course, the setting. It's a much smaller room, much smaller amount of the public is there. Reporters, of course, are being limited from being in the room. We each only have, I believe, one reporter actually there in the room. And also the reaction of the members of the committee